In this episode of the PBD Podcast, host Patrick Bet-David interviews Candace Owens, a conservative political commentator, author, and host of the show, Candace, on the Daily Wire. The conversation covers a range of topics, including Owens' background, her political journey, and her views on current events. Owens begins by discussing her high school years, describing herself as a typical teenager who was not politically inclined. She was more focused on figuring out her identity and had a boyfriend whom she was obsessed with. Owens emphasizes that she was not a radical leftist, as some have claimed, but rather someone who simply did not care about politics at the time. The conversation then shifts to Owens' college years, where she attended the University of Rhode Island and worked for Vogue magazine. She explains that she was liberal but not extremely so, and that she did not have any strong political beliefs. Her focus during this time was on getting her financial life in order, as she had significant student loan debt. The turning point for Owens came in 2015 when Donald Trump announced his presidential campaign. She initially did not want him to win because she saw him as an entertainer rather than a serious candidate. However, after watching one of his speeches in which he addressed the issues facing Black Americans, she realized that the media had misrepresented his words. This led her to question the narrative and explore what the other side was saying. The conversation then delves into the qualities that make a successful president. Owens and Bet-David discuss the importance of having the it factor, or the ability to connect with people and make them feel seen. They also touch on the need for instinct, the ability to read the base and respond accordingly, and the importance of choosing the right enemies. Owens emphasizes the value of naivete and the willingness to challenge the establishment. The discussion then turns to foreign policy, with Owens expressing her belief that the United States should focus on its own problems before getting involved in other countries' affairs. She argues that the idea of spreading American values and principles around the world is arrogant and misguided. Owens suggests that the United States should prioritize national sovereignty and respect other countries' right to govern themselves. Bet-David raises the question of what would happen if a country like China were to attack Taiwan. Owens responds by stating that she would not send a single American son or daughter to die on foreign soil. She emphasizes the need for diplomatic relations and strategic partnerships rather than military intervention. The conversation continues with a discussion of America's standing in the world. Owens acknowledges that the country is currently in decline but believes that the American experiment, as established by the Founding Fathers, is still the greatest in the world. She expresses optimism about the possibility of returning to the principles and values that made America great. Owens continues by criticizing the ranking system used by U.S. News to determine America's standing in various categories. She argues that the rankings are based on perceptions rather than actual data, and that the media often propagates negative narratives about the country. Despite these criticisms, Owens expresses her confidence in America's future and believes that the country can overcome its challenges. One of the main issues Owens identifies is the destruction of the family unit. She argues that the government is encroaching on the family and promoting ideologies that undermine the importance of marriage and traditional family values. Owens sees this as a deliberate strategy to increase government control and diminish individual freedoms. She believes that many societal problems, such as the decline in education and the sexualization of culture, can be traced back to the breakdown of the family unit. When asked about the biggest issue in America today, Owens disagrees with Joe Biden's assertion that white supremacy is the primary concern. She argues that white supremacy is not a significant issue compared to other pressing problems. Owens believes that the destruction of the family unit is the most critical issue, as it underlies many other societal ills. She points to the government's efforts to interfere in family life and the cultural attacks on traditional values as evidence of this problem. The conversation then turns to feminism and the impact it has had on society. Owens argues that feminism has devalued men and promoted a culture that undermines the family unit. She criticizes the idea that women should be like men and suggests that women should prioritize their families instead. Owens also discusses the decline of masculinity and the need for men to have leaders and role models. She believes that the current cultural climate is feminizing men and that a response to this is emerging in the form of a pro-masculine movement. The discussion then shifts to the impeachment inquiry against Joe Biden. Owens expresses her frustration with the political system and doubts that anything significant will come out of the inquiry. She believes that the system is rigged and that the media is biased against conservatives. Owens sees hope in the growing independent media and the cultural gains made by conservative voices. She believes that change is possible, but it requires a focus on winning the cultural war rather than engaging solely in politics. The conversation continues with a discussion on the changing support for Biden among African Americans. Owens believes that there has been a shift in support away from the Democratic Party, particularly among black men. She attributes this to a growing awareness of conservative principles and a rejection of the narrative that men have no value. Owens sees this as a positive development and believes that it will continue to impact future elections. The discussion continues with a focus on feminism and the impact it has had on society. Owens argues that feminism has become a form of liberalism and that it promotes a culture of victimhood. She believes that women should focus on personal responsibility and self-improvement rather than relying on feminism to solve their problems. Owens also criticizes the trend of women embracing their sexuality and believes that it is embarrassing for men to see their partners discussing explicit topics publicly. The conversation then shifts to the influence of social media and surveillance. Owens discusses the use of AI technology to track and monitor workers' productivity in a coffee shop. She believes that this level of accountability can be beneficial in motivating employees to work harder. However, she also acknowledges that it can be dehumanizing and raises concerns about privacy. The discussion then turns to the topic of transgender prisoners in Wisconsin. Owens highlights a report that reveals over 50% of male inmates identifying as transgender females in Wisconsin prisons have been convicted of sexual assault or abuse. She criticizes the decision to house these individuals with female inmates and argues that it puts women at risk. Owens also expresses her frustration with the growing acceptance of transgenderism and the inclusion of more letters in the LGBTQ+ acronym, which she believes promotes sexual deviancy. The conversation then delves into the influence of mainstream media and the power of documentaries. Owens discusses her previous documentary on the Black Lives Matter movement and how it exposed the financial mismanagement of the organization. She also criticizes Netflix for producing documentaries that portray villains as heroes, such as the case of the Central Park Five. Owens believes that this manipulation of narratives by the media is shaping public opinion and distorting the truth. The podcast concludes with a discussion about Owens' latest documentary on the Stephen Avery case, which was the inspiration for the Netflix series, Making a Murderer. Owens explains that she was drawn to this story because it highlights the power of propaganda and the manipulation of public perception. She argues that the documentary misled viewers and presents a distorted version of the truth. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe.